Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and your guide along the way. We are exploring showmanship and play, or we are exploring the deep resonances between showmanship and play. I take it that you have your own ideas of showmanship, if you allow me to use that as a word to describe what it is that you do when you perform. Because most of the people who listen to me, I understand, are performers. And if you don't, then maybe the play aspect here is what draws you to this episode. I know my mum is more interested in these episodes than she were about the deep conversations about performance that we've had in the last season. So either way, we have the showmanship and we have the play and we have the deep resonances between, and we've already spent a few episodes talking about showmanship, and we got a whole season 2, deeply delving into what showmanship is, and you might have a strong relationship to that because you're a performer, and that's why we in this season has to dive a little bit further into what play is, because as we see when we find the descriptions and the depths of play, I believe that we see more and more and more the aspect or the kind of behaviours or the kind of role and the kind of niche that we show folk actually represent in the world. So, quick synopsis of the last episode before we move on. So, we looked at play as something which is so prevalent when every single mammal out there that we know of, and arguably there are lots of other animals too that might exhibit play, but certainly all animals that are mammals, they all play. They exhibit powerful play. We are the most playful of all those species, and certain people like Peter Gray and Friedrich Schiller, separated by quite a while, those two thinkers, but they think that play is not just something that we kind of do a little bit of, it's an actual separate instinct in us. So we looked at that. You can go back and look at more details with that, and the fact that it is so prevalent, it means that it's got to have an important purpose. And one of the reasons why we know that it's got to have a purpose is that we are so frequently drawn towards risky play. Risky behavior, it's fun, it's exciting. There's so many risky kinds of play, and if there's even quite a low elevation of the probability of dying before you procreate, as dying in childhood, and if you're dying in play, chances are you might die whilst playing as a child. So it would have a strong impact on natural selection if you didn't survive. So that means there's got to be some benefits to play, and we looked at that, and we also looked at flow and play, and we basically drew an equal sign between the being in a flow state, which we adults might find ourselves, and children who are in a state of play. Being fully engaged in play is a kind of flow state. So maybe that's how we adults play. Then we talked about the difference between formal games and informal games, and how some of those, the more they diverge, like kids being involved on taking sports very seriously, might be more prone to injury than if you're just playing along in the garden or whatever. But the final thing that we sort of that I kind of mentioned was that, like, how do we actually think of instincts? What is an instinct? And I have this picture that I've come up with, that instincts are when we our feelings, the way we're feeling towards something, is like we are hearing the whispers of our ancestors. But the ancestors aren't speaking in words, they're speaking in feelings. So when we're drawn towards play, or when we're drawn towards connecting with other people, we are hearing the whispers through our emotions and through our feelings of the wise choices of our ancestors. And now, with all of that said, let's move on to today's topic, and we're actually going to spread this out over 3 episodes, where we're going to talk about the different traits, the different because play is so nebulous, it's hard to pin down. So we want to try to pin down certain traits, certain ways of being in the world, and that we can then use to say this is how the play instinct manifests itself. And we're going to talk about Ashley Montague, and he's someone that we're going to talk a little bit about as we go on. So let me not spoil anything more. Let's jump on over into the world of play. But just while I have your attention, maybe just click follow and subscribe to The Way of the Showman. This way you can get all the episodes immediately as they come down. It might not always be the right time to listen to these episodes, but then you have it in your podcast downloader, whatever that choice of yours is. So now, second take, let's jump into the world of ideas and get some more details on how play manifests in the world. I'm going to start today's episode with a little quote by Allison Gopnik, who has written many excellent books. She's a great researcher and thinker, and she has some interesting things to say about play in many of her books, and I found this quote and I thought it was excellent. So, adults, this is Allison Gopnik, adults and children spend their days differently. We work, babies play. Play is the signature of childhood. It's a living, visible manifestation of imagination and learning in action. Allison Gopnik. It's a living, visible manifestation of imagination and learning in action. And this quote is kind of encapsulating what we're trying to do over the next 3 episodes. We are trying to find how play actually manifests in the world, so that we can go, these are aspects of play, these are aspects of them, and she's pinpointing it here. Play is the signature of childhood, so we're going to look into childhood and the traits that come from there. So with that, let's get cracking, because if play is a constant and genuine human drive, an actual instinct, how do we actually recognize it when we see it in the world? Or more specifically, in which kind of behaviors does play manifest itself? Because it's a process, it's not a thing that we can look at. So it manifests itself through the behavior of mammals, through the behavior of human beings. So we've looked at, the 5 specific criteria or characteristics of play, like number 1, it's fun and enjoyable. 2, it's seemingly purposeless. 3, it's self-motivated. And 4, there are rules involved. And finally, it's a free and imaginative improvisation. So each of these 5 criteria are characteristics of the process that we call play, but in the same way that a person is a multifaceted being and must be expressed through more than 5 specific features, I would expect that we could get a better grasp of what the play instinct looks like by finding more ways that it manifests itself in the world. So, what kind of behaviors or attributes are playful? And to answer this question, I think it would be good to start looking at those who play the most, those whom for play is their natural way of being in the world, children. Remember, Allison Gopnik, play is the signature of childhood. You know they're children because they play. So I just thought we'd sort of talk about Einstein, because he had many interesting things, and he was asked by the State University of New York in 1936 to speak about education. And in this talk that you can find online, or you can find it in writing anyway, we find Einstein praising the virtues of the childlike. And he names loving interest, desire for truth, and divine curiosity as aspects of the childlike. So he thinks loving interest, desire for truth, and divine curiosity are all sort of aspects of the childlike. And bearing in mind that he was no scholar of pedagogy, or he was merely a brilliant man who had maybe I don't know if that's related, but he had a rather difficult early childhood. I mean, he didn't actually begin to talk until he was 3 years old. And he didn't have it easy in primary school. But anyway, Einstein's opinion was that the most important task for schools was to foster a desire for knowledge, and an artist-like workmanship. So desire for knowledge, wanting to know, and also an artist-like workmanship. And what did he mean by this, an artist-like workmanship? Well, to have the best chance of fostering this, he said that the point of a school is to develop the childlike inclination for play and the childlike desire for recognition, and to guide the child over to important fields for society. Such a school demands from the teacher that he be a kind of artist in his province. And that's the end quote by Einstein. And if such a school was made a reality, Einstein reckoned that children would prefer school time to vacation. Instead of wanting to have a vacation, they wanted to be at school because it was so stimulating. And I believe then, to add to Einstein's thought there, that if such a school came into existence, we would find that play would be the main subject of the curriculum. So you would discover the knowledge through play. So anyway, Einstein pointed out here loving interest, desire for truth, and divine curiosity as childlike traits. But to go on, I want to find a more sort of comprehensive overview of these things, of these traits. And, as it happened, I did find one in a book by a man called Ashley Montague. And the book is called Growing Young. Growing Young. Not growing old, but growing young. So this is a book that we'll get back to in a later episode when I talk about how childlike features might actually be what made us separate from the apes. It actually might be that the childlike features carried on into adulthood is one of the key things that made our species, Homo sapiens, what it is. But for now, we'll get back to that in a later episode. But for now, I mention it because in the 6th chapter of this book, Montague has compiled a list of no fewer than 27 what he calls basic behavioral needs of children. I'll tell you all of them in a little bit, but he goes, there's 27 behavioral needs that children has. And his idea is that once the basic physical needs like food, water, shelter, protection, and so forth are met, there are further behavioral needs which will quickly make themselves present. And he believes that we have genuine needs that are beyond staying alive and all that, which, if not met, will impact us negatively. And I'll talk about a few of these needs in more detail. I'll go and pick out the ones that will sort of paint a picture of what I, following Friedrich Schiller and Peter Gray, what I think of as the sort of play drive or play instinct that we talked about in the last episode. And I believe that in these traits, we can sort of see the play instinct manifest itself so that we can study it. And if we have this play aspect, and we have it more than any other species, that we human beings play more than any other species play for longer, then possibly this play instinct is a key instinct to understand us as a species, and for you and me, and for us showfolk, it's to understand our role in society. Because I believe that it is our role to put humanity on display in our shows. What interests human beings is that's what we do. We present, like as in the manifesto it says, a showman shows man. What we are showing our audiences is the human condition in all its aspects. So, now, even though I won't talk about all of them, let's just quickly go through this list of the 27 needs that of a healthy childhood development. And that's not to say that we can't survive without them, but having them in your life as a child is always better than not having them. Number 1, Montague says, is love. Then it's friendship, sensitivity, thinking soundly, to know, to learn, work, organization, curiosity, wonder, playfulness, imagination, creativity, open-mindedness, flexibility, experimental mindedness, if that's a thing, explorativeness, resilience, enthusiasm, sense of humor, joyfulness, laughter and tears, optimism, honesty and trust, compassion, or being compassionate, and then the last two is song and dance. So if you have all of those needs met, that you learn to be flexible and you like to explore and you get to develop resilience and enthusiasm for a sense of humor, and you have love, friendship, and you learn to be sensitive and to think soundly and to learn. If you have all of these covered, then you got a good foundation for a healthy life. And I believe this is a wonderful list of traits. If you got all these needs met, I reckon chances are you're gonna look back at a happy childhood. And the list seems a little skewed towards the positive aspects, and that's because these are needs. This is because Montague finds that these traits in particular needs to be developed, or they need development in childhood. Because according to him, and I believe him, common sense, it's like according to him and also to common sense, I believe that getting angry, being jealous or vindictive aren't features that needs to be developed. So the negative traits, like one of course needs to get oneself into a right relationship with anger and so forth, so you don't get taken advantage of, or that so that when you need to protect someone that you love. But Montague believes that if these 27 needs are met, then the child will be poised perfectly for getting into a right relationship with anger and lies and so forth. Because some of these negative traits might not always be negative, but if you, like lying and anger and or whatever, there's a right time for everything. So these 27 traits will integrate as well into whatever society we are born into. But as a personal note here, I just wanted to say before we move on that because Montague doesn't make this specific claim, because his book isn't about play per se, it is about neoteny or juvenilization of how childlike traits can be retained into adulthood, which we're going to talk about in a future episode. Let me not digress inside my digression. But I just wanted to say that I believe that if a child gets enough time and freedom to play, all these 27 needs will be met. I'm not claiming that play is all you need, because as a song claims, all you need is love, and that is Montague's first need. And certain aspects of love is covered by play, but I do believe that there are aspects of love that might not be fully covered by play, such as the particular kind of love that we get from parents or loving caregivers. So this is a particular need all on its own. And once I'd sort of thought of this, and there are many different aspects or whatever, but I'm not going to go through all the things where I'm going to play couldn't cover this or couldn't cover that. But once I'd thought about this thing of parental love, then I began to think a lot about it, and as a result of that thinking, I have a few things to say about it, and I'm going to do that in a future episode. But my main point now, before moving on, is that I think that these 27 needs would, by and large, be met by being allowed to freely play with kids of mixed ages and abilities. All right, so before now, moving on yet again, before we start naming traits like Harlem Pepper in Best in Show and starts naming nuts, I would just like to say that this view of childhood as in having all these, like these are the needs that he says these needs to be met, but these are also then traits of children that you see in them, like loving kindness and things that Einstein talked about. So these are the needs, but that's also then the aspects of a childhood that they are then they are pulled towards, so they're inclined to do. But this view of childhood is not the only view, and up until very recently there was a much darker view of childhood that also existed, because today most people, myself included, wholeheartedly agrees with this summary of Montague's list and Einstein's ideas of children and the childlike. But in his book, Montague describes another darker view of children, which were frequently held up until very recently. And this following quote is from Edward Glover. I didn't know who that was, but I looked him up, and he was, at the time when he said this, was very well respected in British psychology and psychoanalysis. And this quote comes from a lecture that he held in 1922 called The Roots of Crime. So we already see here where this is leading. But this lecture, it wasn't just a lecture that was said and it was just atypical or whatever, because the lecture then was printed into a book. And this book was so popular that it was printed into 3 editions. First in 1922, then again in 1960, and then in 1970. So it stayed in print for about 50 years, meaning that it was a demand for this book constantly throughout these 50 years. Books stay in demand, usually because people think it's important what is being said in them. So anyway, according to Wikipedia, Glover's most lasting achievements are found exactly in the combined fields of psychotherapy and criminology. So here, let's where are the roots of crime? Let's see what Edward Glover has to say. He says, quote, "We can say that a perfect normal infant is almost completely egocentric, greedy, dirty, violent in temper, destructive in habit, profoundly sexual in purpose, aggrandizing in attitude, devoid of all but the most primitive reality sense, without conscience of moral feeling, whose attitude to society, as represented by the family, is opportunist, inconsiderate, domineering, and sadistic. And when we come to consider the criminal type labeled psychopathic, it will be apparent that many of these characteristics can, under certain circumstances, persist into adult life. In fact, judged by adult social standards, the normal baby is for all practical purposes a born criminal." End quote. So for today, this feels like it's a pretty extreme view. One which is probably exceedingly rare these days, but I think it's worthwhile to kind of include it for no other purpose, than to balance out this glorious picture that Montague's list paints of childhood behavioral needs. And thus, being the needs, they're also then the traits that you see in children. And if Glover was right in even some of his harsh tirade, then the need to nurture and develop these traits on Montague's list are all the more important. So Montague, he comments on this quote, and the comments are along these lines that what I said, and because he doesn't actually waste much time trying to argue with Glover, because as Tyson Yunker Porter, the Aboriginal fellow who wrote the book, a wonderful book called Sand Talk, which I highly recommend, he says about this, of why I don't want to argue with people. He goes, never wrestle with a pig. He says, never wrestle with a pig, because you'll both end up covered in shit and the pig likes it. So Montague doesn't get into any trying to argue with Glover. But what he does say, though, is that the overwhelming evidence from literally thousands of investigators is that, quote, the child is born with all its drives oriented in the direction of growth and fulfillment in health and harmony. And by health, I mean the ability to love, to work, to play, and to think soundly. So rather than blaming infants and children for the behaviors of the depravity which Glover describes, Montague places the responsibility and prevalence of antisocial behaviors on incompetent socializers, i.e. parents, teachers, and adults. Maybe the reality, I'm commenting, maybe the reality is somewhere in between, but that said, Montague then finally goes on to point out that the growth of the features which he describes in his 27-point long list does not in any way need to be exclusive to childhood. This is what we see here, rather the contrary. He advocates that to continue growing in all aspects of human existence, we should cultivate the spirit of the child through adolescence and into old age. The continuous and ongoing growth of the characteristic qualities of the child appears to Ashley Montagu to be the evolutionary destiny of Homo sapiens. He believes that the childlike qualities are actually the evolutionary destiny of Homo sapiens, and we'll get back to that. But now, finally, let's look at the first of... I've selected a few things and a few of these traits from his list, so we can look at these now, and I think we'll only have time to talk about one of them. Yeah, these are important to paint a picture of how the play instinct is expressed in human behavior, and the first one of those is curiosity. So anyone who's had children or been around younglings will have noticed their incessant curiosity. Kids are curious. Adults are too, but our curiosity is not at all, it's not all-consuming like it is for kids. Through a long life, we learn lots of stuff and experience a lot of situations. So when we encounter the world, we're not as easily impressed. Kids, on the other hand, can't get enough of the world. Walking down the sidewalk, they might have their mind blown by some tinfoil in the gutter. We might not even notice it, and if we do, we instantly categorize it as trash. This kind of childlike curiosity often expresses itself in questions like, "What's this? What is that for? How does this work?" Or simply, "Why? Why?" But as we have already established, instincts does not primarily manifest themselves through words. It's through feelings. It's almost as soon as a child comes into the world, they will prefer to look at things that are new. If you pay close attention to what babies pay attention to, you will notice that they gaze longer at unfamiliar things. This is through the work of Allison Gopnik. She studied babies a lot. And if you show a baby a rock that's painted with bright colored patterns, they'll look at this longer than a normal looking rock that they've seen before. If you show them another rock that's painted with a different pattern, but with the same colors, they won't look quite as long as that before their attention is let loose from the arrest of the novelty that the novelty of this rock had on them. So if you show them a normal unpainted rock, and their eyes might seek out the painted rocks on the table instead. And if you show them a new rock painted in completely different colors, their attention will again be arrested for longer. And scientists studying this reads this as they interpret it as that we seek out and study the new, and they see this as an aspect of curiosity. So in a book that I've mentioned before, where we talked about kids playing in the concentration camps, so in the introduction to this, oh no, actually that wasn't that book, but I think maybe he mentions it too, but I actually talked about another book, but beside the point. In the introduction to the Norwegian biologist Marcus Lindholm's book, and this book is called Curiosity, and it is from 2020, yeah. And I would have to think there. I think it's from 2020. But in the book, he distinguishes, or is it from 2022 actually? I think it's from 2022, yeah. Anyway, not that you care that much. In this book, he distinguishes between different kinds of curiosity. One that makes us ask what's under a rock, or if it's going to rain on the weekend, or whether there's something interesting to see in the scroll of your social media. And another kind of curiosity is wonder. And he says that in a strict sense, and quote, we don't actually wonder what time it is, even though this is how it is expressed in English. When you want to know what time it is, you're not filled with wonder as to what glorious or sublime experience awaits you upon finding out if it's 2:15 or 2:30. We don't wonder what time is. we wonder what time is, says Lindholm. He describes wonder as a mild form for alienation in not feeling quite at home. The two kinds of curiosity blends into each other and are more of a spectrum than clearly defined things, but rather two aspects of an attitude rather than two separate, completely separate things or separate ways to view the world. So this is interesting. It's like we're curious about, wonder what's behind that corner, but we really wonder about what is time, what is play, what does it mean, all this stuff. So recently in May 2023, I had a chance to meet up with a man called Ivar Heckscher. And if you are a faithful listener to the podcast, then you will have heard him talk in some of these recent episodes in the end of season 3. He's an 80-year-old man who has been instrumental in creating the circus school in Stockholm. And during one of the conversations Jay Gilligan and I had with him, and you might already have heard this, but I'm saying it here, he briefly talks about how we can kind of the relationships to anything that we have, that in any kind of relationship that we have towards something, there could see to be a progression from curiosity to interest to love. So my relationship to anything, there is a progression in this relationship that can go from curiosity to interest to love as 3 different aspects of ways of relating. And I found this to be quite profound. Perhaps this is well known to you and many others, but to see these 3 as transformations and expansions of essentially the same thing, to me this just made immediate sense. And with this in mind, I thought that Marcus Lindholm's first level of curiosity, as in what we experience when we look into the fridge wondering where the jam might be, interest, as Lindholm describes it, is a deepening of the curiosity, like an expansion where the encounter is with something more mysterious, like, is a strawberry, like you're finding the strawberry jam and then you start to wonder, is the strawberry dead as soon as it's picked? Or does it slowly die as time passes? Or is it only dead when it is rotten? You know, questions like this, such a curiosity sparks over into interest. And the first level is just wondering that can be solved by finding the jam, whilst the debate about when a strawberry can be declared dead is something which we can't find the answer to in the same way that we can find the jam behind a head of lettuce. The mystery of the strawberry has transformed our curiosity into interest, which in this case both means a more active and ongoing wondering, but further, I would say that in the case of the strawberry, the etymology of the word interest, as in interest, a between being, seems to resonate for me as a beautiful description of the state of the picked strawberry. It's between life and dead. And once we have arrived at this next level of curiosity, where we have met something that unsettles us, that we can't, it's not quite one thing, not quite the other, something which is separated from us and which has an interesting attraction on us, then we can expand the relation once again into love. And love being the ability to sit with the feeling that one will never fully know a definite answer on the death of a strawberry. We might never exhaustively know one's partner, or you might never exhaustively know your child, but love is to sit with this, not knowing for certain. You don't know for certain, but you just sit with it. And the poet John Keats says that, describing, I think this can describe it, he says that a poet must be capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. And although Keats spoke of poetry, I find this to be deeply resonant with the love that we are talking about. which is a curiosity matured into caring without the need to fully grasp, limit, or possess something or someone. I believe this is also what the poet David Whyte calls naming, and in his book Consolations, it's called Consolations, the Solace, Nourishment, and Underlying Meaning of Everyday Words. Brilliant book. He says, naming love too early is a beautiful but harrowing human difficulty. Most of our heartbreak comes from attempting to name who or what we love and the way we love too early in the vulnerable journey of discovery. Naming something too early makes it less than. We can never know in the beginning, in giving ourselves to a person, to a work, to a marriage, or to a cause, exactly what kind of love we are involved with. This is still David Whyte talking. When we demand a certain specific kind of reciprocation before the revelation has flowered completely, we find ourselves disappointed and bereaved, and in that grief we may miss the particular form of love that is actually possible, that did not meet our initial and too specific expectations. Feeling bereft, we take our identity as one who is disappointed in love, our almost proud disappointment preventing us from seeing the lack of reciprocation from the person or the situation as simply a difficult invitation into a deeper and as yet unrecognizable form of affection. So maybe this here as well is it's another way of like how from curiosity, interest, love that Heckscher talked about, or that Marcus Lindholm talked about, these like of the curiosity and wonder as two different aspects of it. So what I love about curiosity, and this is just this whole little bit is just to sort of explore curiosity for what the different ways that we can look at what it is, and it has always to do with relations. It's like when you're curious about something, you acknowledge that there are other things in the world, not yourself, and through the curiosity, through the interest, and through the love, your relationships change to those things. So the way we relate to the world, knowing these and viewing that through the lens of curiosity, interest, love, that helps enrichen the world. So what I love about curiosity, if viewed properly, is the humbleness that it instills. We stand before an ant's nest or a painting by Sean Miro or a carved wood religious icon or another human being, and we get filled with the sense that each of these have more to tell us, that they are more than what they appear to be. You don't know what, or even you don't even know how you know, but curiosity is the emotion that makes you stand before the world like a child. In encountering the world, the child grasps, as we have seen in the infant's infatuation with novelty, looking at the painted rocks, that the world is just filled with secrets. Wherever you turn, there's something new. And the child picks up anything and immediately asks, what? Why? How? Can I? And they ask it about everything all the time. And we ask it too. But we are told that some things aren't worthy of asking about, like the tin foil in the gutter. But children and curiosity in particular smolders in us, like the childlike and the curiosity in us. It smolders in us like a niggling inkling that there is something more that we're not yet, that we just haven't gotten to yet. There's more there. I don't know what it is, but there is more. So with curiosity into interest and then into love, we can learn, as William Blake said, to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. Because it is there if you look. And we can find meaning in depth and in doing shows and performing circus tricks or magic. And we just have to remain curious, not lose sight of the feeling that there is always more to something. Everything is deep and richly connected when you pursue it through the simple act of curiosity. Art, religion, science, and loving others are all areas where we should remember curiosity. Standing before a Bernini sculpture, the simple altar in a Greek church by the sea, and in studying a plant patiently, or your child or partner, with a genuine wish for them to reveal themselves. This is a wonderful way to get yourself into a right relationship with them, or getting yourself into a right relationship with the world. All right, I thought to finish off this episode, I would read you a little excerpt from a poem by Heathcote Williams. Heathcote Williams wrote a book, it's basically a long poem called Whale Nation, and this is a little excerpt from that, and I thought that it was apt because we have, in the beginning of this season, we spoke quite a bit about whales and whale evolution, and this is a connect with, and in this little excerpt, Heathcote Williams connects whales and play. So, just before I read that, maybe you want to go over onto Instagram. As soon as somebody reads poetry, you might get drawn towards social media. But go over there and follow the way of the showman. You won't be disappointed. Not so long ago, I handed out a whole bunch of T-shirts. Maybe something like that's going to happen again. Or maybe you just want to see if I finally have made something exciting, taken some cool pictures and put them up. Maybe not, but follow it nonetheless. So, now, without further ado, let's read this Whale Nation. Whales play in an amniotic paradise. Whales play in an amniotic paradise, their light minds shaped by buoyancy, unrestricted by gravity, somersaulting like angels or birds, like our own lives in the womb. Whales play for 3 times as long as they spend searching for food. Whales play for 3 times as long as they spend searching for food. Delicate, involved games, with floating seabirds' feathers blown high into the air, and logs of wood flipped from the tops of their head, carried in their teeth, for a game of tag that ranges across the entire Pacific. Play without goals. And they do not work to eat. They play to eat. They do not work to eat. They play to eat. So that's Heathcote Williams, and I'll leave those words for you to take with you until next time. And take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.